DesignCourse.com. Today we're going to be stepping into Blender 3D, which is a free 3D graphics application you can download. It's very lightweight. It's only like 60 or 70 megabytes from blender.org. And also we're going to take the final render and take it into Photoshop and just make some adjustments for it. All right, so check out DesignCourse.com, especially DesignCourse.com/premium, where I trained you how to design awesome things one-on-one. And also there are full video courses and other goodies in there as a Design Course Premium member. All right, let's get started. All right, so if you've never used Blender before, the way you move around in this 3D space is by holding down your third mouse button and just moving around. To zoom up, you use your mouse scroll wheel. To pan around, you hold Shift and that third or middle mouse button like that. All right. So secondly, if you want to delete objects, it's very simple. Just hit the delete and enter, which we're not going to do because we're going to use this cube to get started for the monitor. So that's the only introduction I'm going to do. I'm just going to kind of describe things as I go along. All right, so what we need to do from this cube here is create the basic shape of a monitor. And I'm not going to get real specific and try to get all the exact dimensions down. I'm just going to eyeball it because really we're not going to have any other objects around it. So the exact proportions aren't, necessary for this particular composition. So what we want to do obviously is flatten this a little bit. So the way we do that is right now currently we're in object mode that allows you to do things like scale things up, the object as a whole, rotate them, move them around, etc. But if you want to actually deform the shape you were selected on, you can hit tab and now you're in edit mode. Okay, you can also switch to edit an object and all these other modes right in that little menu there. All right, so to make this flat, we basically have to, we can do it in several different ways, but the way, before I get there, I want to describe something real quick. Right now, all of the vertices are selected. We can see the whole thing is highlighted in orange, kind of. We have three different modes. You have Vertex Select mode, you have Edge mode, and to select objects in object mode, you just right click, by the way, it's kind of important. To select your edges, you right click them. To select your vertices, you right click them. And then you also have face mode. So you have those three different modes. That's face, side, and vertex select. To select all, by the way, just hit A and A. That will basically toggle between select all and select none. All right, so what we want to do is scale this in this way. We're going to assume that this is the front of the monitor. All right, so to scale something, all you have to do is hit S, and you'll see by default it will scale it along all three axes. Well, if you only want it along the Y, for example, you just hit Y. Very simple. So most monitors, unless you're working with one of the old school CRT monitors, are pretty thin. All right, so what we want to do is scale this in so that it's real thin. If you need to make it a little bit thinner, you could just hit S again, Y, and scale that sucker in right around there. All right, so now we need to make this wider. So the way we'll do that is the same way. So S and X, and then just drag it out roughly right around there. And that looks like a pretty accurate size of maybe like a 1920 by 1080 type of monitor, or 16 by 9. All right, so very simple so far. Another thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to move everything up here. All right, and I also want to scale the whole thing down just a little bit. All right, and another thing that I want to do is go ahead over here in this panel. So we have all these different tabs. We want to add what's called a subdivision surface on this. All right, so you just click Add Modifier and Subdivision Surface. We'll see that it turns it into this crazy looking thing. So the reason we want to add the subdivision surface is because the monitor on the back side, usually on most monitors, are kind of rounded. So you'll see how we can achieve that effect here shortly. So what we want to do also, before I go any further, we could have done this before this step, is hit Control R. Now what that does is add what's called an edge loop. If you left click once and then twice without moving it, you'll have it set. And so if I back up real quick just to show you, if you hit Control R again and you use your mouse scroll wheel, you can add a bunch. And the way this works is, since we just want one, once you add them, left click, you can also place them wherever you want. So there's two different steps when it comes to adding those edge loops. So we want to do it so that it stays right in the center. We don't want it to move. So Control R and then enter on your keyboard will make sure it won't move on that second step. All right, so once we've done that, because what we're working with is kind of mirrored, like we have the right and the left over here, we can go to the vertex mode and we're going to delete this half. And we want to make sure that this right here is selected. Then we're going to hit 1 on the number pad on the keyboard. That gives us to the front view. And the reason I've turned this on, if we turn this off, for example, we hit A to deselect, and then we hit B. B is kind of like a lasso tool in Photoshop. And then left click and drag and select. It's only going to select the front vertices, which is not what you want. You want it to select both. That's what this does basically. So when we hit 1 again, make sure this is turned on, hit B, left click. Now it has selected both of them. So now we hit delete, vertices. So now we only have half of it. We're going to add another modifier, and this is called mirror. And the mirror modifier makes it so that whatever you do over here, it's going to be mirrored over here. And that just kind of saves us with some work, basically. What's also cool is we can add another edge loop right here. Hit enter. And then we can also hit A to deselect, B, delete, vertices, and then we can specify Z. Sorry about that. I didn't see it and I was wondering where it was. Well, it's down here, and that's because the origin point was set right there. So if I take everything up here and I drop it, we can see that now we have it closer together. And if we turn on clipping right here and we move it together, we'll see that it doesn't intersect when we add them. All right, so now we have it so that the whatever we do over here is going to be mirrored on these other 3 corners down here, which is handy. All right, so what we want to do now is turn up the view subdivisions and renders as well. And when you do this, it'll make it smoother. So I'm just going to specify 3 for mine. All right, so now what we want to do is go ahead and hit Control R to add an edge loop. Right around there will work. Control R to add an edge loop over here and push it up right around there. All right. And then if we come to the side, we'll see that normally when it comes to a monitor, the flat portion's right here, and then the portion where it kind of just curves down is in the back. So what we can do, if we come over to this side, is hit Control R. We'll add an edge loop along this portion and bring it forward. So now, if we look at this, we'll see it has a much better appearance, or more realistic towards like a TV or a monitor in this case. All right. All right, so far so good. So now we have this issue here, and this is created from the subdivision surface. We hit Control R and add an edge loop right there. Maybe Control R and then an edge loop at the bottom. We will make it go away, basically. All right. Pretty simple stuff. Okay, so now what I want to do is separate the very front of this, because this front face is going to be black, around the edges at least, and then this back portion is going to be like a silver, sort of glossy slash chrome slash metal type of appearance or material. All right, so what we can do is, now that we've had this basically modeled how we want it to be, we can apply the mirror modifier. And so if you've ever used Photoshop, you know, this is where you're basically rasterizing. That's the, I guess you would call that the equivalent to applying a modifier. So once you hit apply, you can't really update it anymore. So you have to do it in also object mode. So switch to tab to object mode and hit apply. All right, so now we have this applied, and now what we want to do is hit tab, and you'll see now everything is all here, all the vertices. And what I'm going to do is switch over here to the face select mode. We're going to turn off this limit section to visible, and the reason is if you have this turned on and you go to right click and select a face, sometimes you'll select the back one by accident, so that prevents that from happening. You can click it anywhere and it'll only select those front faces. An easy way of selecting all of these would just be to hit 1 on your keyboard for front view, and then hit A to deselect everything, and then hit B and select all of those. All right, so now you only have this front portion selected. All right, simple enough. So now what we want to do is hit Shift D and then left click or hit enter. So what that does is it duplicated that selection. So if we move this forward, which you can just watch as you don't have to do this, you'll see we have a copy. All right, so it's in the same spot. What I want to do now is separate it. If I hit P, you hit, that means to separate by selection. What it means when you separate something is no longer is it going to be a part of the object. It's just separated from this object. So now if we go back to object mode, we can right click this, and this is our main object that we've been working with, but also right click this, and that is only our front. So what we want to do now is make this kind of like a black glossy texture. And so this is the point where we want to switch to cycles render. And so I always use cycles. I've actually never used Blender render. I'm a little bit late to the Blender game, so cycles render is superior. And what we want to do is now come here to the materials tab and click on use nodes. And nodes is basically what cycles uses for its material system, so you'll always do that step. And we'll go ahead and make this just black just for now. And just so we can get a view set up real quickly, let's go ahead and get some lighting and a plane, like our floor, and then some emission planes as well. So right now, we've only been in solid mode, but if you switch to rendered, we'll see a quick view of what everything looks like. All right, so what we want to do is first, I think what we'll do, you can do any number of steps first. I'm just trying to think of what would make logical sense. What we'll do is we're going to switch to the render settings over here. And if you have a graphics processor, you can use GPU compute. If you don't see that option, go to File, User Preferences, and go over here to System and see for compute device, select CUDA if the option's available. It will be available if your graphics card has a graphics card processor. So I have two GeForce GTX 580s, and you'll see that option. Now that basically makes everything like 1000% faster when it comes to rendering and previewing. All right, so second here, I'm going to leave that there. This 50%, when we go to actual render, that means it's only going to do 50% of your X and Y value here. So I just make it 100%. That's nothing we really have to worry about at the moment though. Sampling, the higher you have this set, the longer it'll take, but the better it'll look. So render, probably 1000 or so. Preview, I'm going to choose about 100. Preview is what we're doing here by selecting render. This isn't a final render. When you finally render, you go up and click on render. So the other thing that we want to worry about when it comes to rendering is the tiles. If you are using GPU, 256 by 256. And again, that's something that you really worry about when you click on render. All right, so now what I want to do is add a floor. So I'm going to switch back to solid view. I'm going to make sure we have both of our objects selected. So I have my front face selected. I'm going to hold shift and right click and then move this up. And then hit Shift A, mesh plane. And now I'm going to hit S for scale. And I'm going to put in a value of, I'm going to try 40. So it's going to scale it up 40 times and hit enter. All right, so then what I want to do, I'm going to come out here. I'm going to give us some light. So I'm just going to come out maybe right around there, just above it a little bit. Shift A, mesh, and then plane. Right now it's facing downwards. So we can hit R for rotate and X on the X axis and then 45 for a 45-degree angle. So now it's facing downwards onto our monitor. I'm going to scale it down just a little bit, I think. So hit S and just move your mouse a bit. And I'm going to add 3 of these. Shift D will duplicate. And you can move it around wherever, but if you hit X, it'll only move it along the X axis. And then, actually, before I do that, I'm going to delete that one. I'm going to set up the material. So click on materials, hit new. Surface, we're going to use emission, which is right up there. Strength, I'm going to try 20 for now. The color is white. And just so you can see what this looks like, select a rendered. All right, so when you're in rendered mode, you can't see what you're selected on, but you could still work with objects. So if you hit Shift D, enter, and then hit G, and that's the shortcut for move, X, so G and X, and then move your mouse, and then Shift D, enter, G, and X. Yeah, right around there will do well. All right. Okay. So now, if I go back to solid, we want this to have a separate material than the front. So the way you do that is, because right now they both have what's called, this one is called material. With this one selected, the front face of it, we're going to change this to front screen for the name. And then on the right, or in the back rather, hit this little plus sign. That will basically replicate it, but it becomes now a separate material for that object. So we're going to call this back screen. All right, so remember, we don't just want our surface to have a diffuse texture. We're going to add what's called a mix shader, which allows you to add a couple different shaders here. So the way we do that is come up over here, choose mix. And by the way, if you want to preview what it looks like when you're making these changes, you can switch to rendered. And we want to go to shader here. And so this is the first shader of our mix shader. This value basically means how much or how less of the first one that you want to edit. So the first one, we'll just make a diffuse, which is down here. And real quickly, the reason that's happening is because the front screen is kind of intersecting with the same portion that we duplicated. So all you have to do is, with the back screen selected, if you hit G, hit G and then Y, that way it only moves along the Y axis. If we move it just a tiny bit, you'll see that now it's appearing as it should. And if there's a little bit of space in between it, for now that's not really a problem that I'm going to worry about. Okay, so now it's not really what I would call a reflective. So that's only because we don't have the second shader down here. So we're going to change this one to glossy. All right, simple enough. Also, we want to make this plane here that it's sitting on, we want to make that black along with the background. So the background, the way we could do that is switch to the worlds tab right there. We'll see it's this gray color right now. Make that completely black. And then we'll right click to select the plane. Make sure that's selected. We'll go back to rendered. And we'll select on the materials, give it a new one. And we'll make this a mix shader here. Oops. Mix shader. And we'll make the other one diffuse, the top one diffuse, the bottom one glossy. Okay. And for the colors, I'm going to drop these down to gray. The top one. This one will be a little bit lighter. All right. So for this side one, if we right click it, notice you can see the individual faces real quick. I forgot to real quickly, if you make sure you have it selected, switch over to rendered again, choose smooth right here, and that'll make it all smooth, which is much better. All right. So now what we want to do, I'm going to switch back to solid. We want to make sure we have both of our objects here selected. So the back one selected, the front one, hold shift, right click. Now we're going to move this up off of the floor a bit. Right around there, looks good. And now we want to create this stand. All right, so the stand, pretty simple. The way we'll do that is I hit 1 on the number pad. Left click to make the origin somewhere just right around here in the center, near the bottom. And hit Shift A and plane. All right, so R, X, and 90. We'll flip it 90 degrees on the X-axis. Hit S for scale and scale it down right around there. And we want to move it to the back. Now we also want to give it some thickness. Right now it has no thickness, so the way you do that is in the modifiers, add modifier, and we'll select solidify. When you do that, it gives us a little bit of thickness, and the thickness is adjusted right here in this value. You can increase it by doing this, or just left clicking and dragging, maybe somewhere right around there. All right, that's a decent thickness. Okay, so then what we want to do is adjust it so that it's a little bit taller. So S and Z. And we want to, we're not going to have a back view in this composition, so it's not real important what it looks like in the back here, but we want it to kind of just come down here and then sit on the floor. And so we're going to add real quickly another modifier, the subdivision surface. We'll put up to 3, hit smooth, so our shading smooth, just so we don't forget about that. Hit tab, and we're going to hit Control R, and left click and move it to the left, Control R, move it to the right, and left click. Then we want to make sure back faces are turned on, vertex select mode, hit A to deselect, B, and now we can start extruding. So to extrude something, you hit E. So if we hit 3 on the number pad, we'll go to the side view just to see what this thing looks like. So E, and you can hit Z to make sure it stays on the Z axis. And you can also move it out like this. And also, yeah, based on where the current plane is, you'll see it kind of go beneath it too far, which obviously you don't want, but we'll worry about that in a second. We'll hit E again, X, oops, E, Z, I mean, sorry, not X. And push this one out just a little bit. And then E again, Z. Move this one in, maybe right around there. And then E, and then Y. It'll come out a little bit further. Right around there. All right, so If we go to rendered, we'll see it's above it a little bit. So what we can do is, right now it's currently selected, so we hit G and Z and just bring it down just a tad bit. And we'll want to do the same thing for these two, this line right here. So A, or A rather to deselect, B, and then hit B again. Right around there. So now rendered view shows us this. All right, so for the thickness, I think I want it a little bit thicker than that. So what we'll do is turn this up. I'm going to try just 0.01. And let me go here to solid. All right. And actually, we're going to change that to 0.1. Actually, maybe 0.2, see what that looks like. All right, now that's a little bit better in terms of thickness. So if I hit A, B, pull those up just a bit, right around there. All right, that's good. And then if I hit S and X, we can just enlarge it a tad bit. All right, that looks pretty decent in my opinion, so check it out in rendered. All right, and let's get out of object or edit mode, go to object mode. And with this selected, the back portion here, let's go to materials. It's called back screen. Let's give that the same material. So you click on this. Now we have that material right there. You know, I may actually want to change it a little bit. And yeah, bring it down just a notch in terms of the grayness. All right. Just checking this out. Yeah, I think that looks good. Okay. All right, so now what I want to do is I want to add the actual portion where you have the viewable area in the screen. So let me see something here real quick. Go back to solid. So yeah, when you go to when you view most monitors, the outer portion might be black, or some at least, not most. But the one I'm going for will have a black border around here, and then the actual portion where you view, you know, whatever it is you're viewing will be in here. So the way I'm going to do this, first, real quickly, I want to make an adjustment because we can see there's space here in between this front face. So if we get in there real close, bring it in, make sure we didn't go one way too far. All right, that looks good. Okay. So now what we want to do is I go to solid, hit 1, and right here in the center, Shift A, plane, RX 90, hit S, and this is where we want the thickness to be adjusted, or the from the height. So I think this right here, maybe just a tad bit more, S and Z. All right, and then S and X. I think right there looks good. All right. Now what we want to do is make this so that when we're viewing this, we have to unwrap it so that we can place the whatever is going to be in here, which is going to be a Photoshop interface, will be on it. So what we'll do is, in order to get an image on there, we have to left click and drag from this little icon here, and that will split the screen. Over here we can change the view to the UV image editor. We're going to hit new, And make sure yours is set at 2048 by 2048. Hit OK. And you can use your mouse scroll wheel to zoom out so you can see everything. Over here, hit 1 on your number pad, and then go to edit mode, so hit tab. With that selected, hit U for unwrap, and we're going to choose project from view. Hit S, G, and somewhere right around there. All right, so now we go to UVs and we go to export UV layout. All right, so I've created a new folder, and I'm going to call this front UV, and we're going to make it a PNG. Make sure all UVs is selected down here, PNG, export UV layout. All right, so now this is where we switch to Photoshop. All right, so I'm going to load up Photoshop, and I have it loaded, and I went to File, Open, and Front UV is what we want to open. And this is a pretty large image. Layer 0 we see here is where our UVs are placed. Control-Shift-N for a new layer. Hit OK. Drop it down beneath it, and we're going to make it black for the foreground, and then with the fill tool, just left click. So now we can see this area where we can place anything inside of it that we want to appear on that screen. So what I'm going to do is maximize my window. I have a 1920 by 1200 resolution. So if I double click this, the interface is kind of go away because I'm not recording my full screen. But what I'm going to do is get this off screen real quick, and I'm going to go ahead and hit Alt and print screen, and that will copy to my clipboard, you know, whatever current application I'm on. And so if I drag this back here, and I go back to this size, and go to Control N for a new document, hit OK. Oh no, it did the wrong thing. Are you kidding me? 1 second. Let me get this off. All right, so I paused and I made sure I did that correctly. I go to File, New, paste that in, and my recording application, Camtasia, that has these stupid green things right here. So all I'm gonna do is just take this real quick, hold Shift, and these are all the same color. Edit Fill, and then do the same thing over here. Get that color right here, and then Edit Fill. All right, so now for some reason it also kind of has stuff outside of this. So what I want to do is make sure I only select the application here with the rectangular marquee tool, and then Control C to copy. Come back here, Control V to paste that in, and I'll drag it above. And now we want to make this align so that it's right there on the edge of that UV layer. All right, so we're going to have to scale this down, and I can take the opacity down a little bit so we can see. If I zoom out holding Alt and my mouse scroll wheel, we'll see that it gets a little bit too large, the screenshot. So if we hit Control T, come down here, hold Shift, we can get it to roughly around the right size. Hit Move tool, hit Apply, and then take the rectangular marquee tool, select right around here, because we see it goes below. I want to get this bottom stuff here. And I'm going to take the Move tool, just left click and hold it, and then hold Shift, and then drag it up. There, now it's basically in the size of our UV portion right there. So now what we're going to do is hide this UV portion. Make sure this is 100% again. So we're hiding the UV, the layout layer, and everything else can be the same. You can leave this black one right here, and then save it as a new file. File save. I'm just going to choose Save for Web. I use that often. And a JPEG, 92 quality is fine. Hit Save. I'm going to call this front-texture. I'm going to go back to Blender, and Now we're going to switch back here to what's called the node editor. All right, so you'll have a blank screen there at first. And what we want to do is we can come over here to render just to see what everything looks like. And we're in the material section, hit new, and we'll see these are what are called nodes. So we have the material output, and then we have our diffuse right here. So you can adjust materials over here or over here. Over here kind of gives you more fine control in terms of how it looks. So we want to add that image onto this diffuse portion right here. So we hit Shift A, texture, image texture. Connect the color to this color, and it's pink or purple basically because there's no image selected yet. Then you hit open, and we want to select our folder, front texture, and there we go. So now if I right click right in this middle area and hit join area, we want to join this over here. So left click, we could see we now have our awesome monitor. Pretty cool. We can get up there and yeah. All right, so now what we want to do is fix something that's been annoying me. You look onto the side, there's like a deformation right here. You can see it in the back too, it's along here. And that was from our clipping that we had applied. So if we go back here to solid, I'm gonna go back to edit. Make sure you have this back portion selected. And if we go to edit mode, hit tab, and we want to make sure we're on vertex select right here. The reason that's happening is because there are actually two sets of vertices along this line because we had that clipping option selected. So we want to delete one of them because it's affecting the subdivision surface. So the way you select one is just hit Alt and then right click. That'll give you a selection of just one of them, and then you hit delete vertices. So now it should be completely smooth right there. We have the same thing happening up here as well. So Alt, right click, and I think this should work. We'll hit delete and try. Yeah, that may. Yeah, I think we have the same thing over here as well. Let's check and see what this looks like here real quick on rendered. All right, that's much better. All right, so now everything is looking good. This would be a good time to save what you're working on, by the way. So I'm gonna go over here and call this project. All right, looking good. So now there's one thing I want to change real quickly. Go back to object mode tab. We're gonna right click and select our base. This should probably be coming out a little bit more. All right, so what we want to do is go into edit mode, and I'm gonna hit A, B. I think that'll look a little bit better right there. All right, so now we'll go back to object mode and go to rendered. All right, so far so good. So now what I want to do is create kind of like a path. So in Photoshop or Illustrator, for example, you have the pen tool, and that allows you to create paths. So I kind of want like this path that's coming from the screen and wrapping around it. So the way we can do this and create basically a wire is we'll go to solid mode here, and we'll hit 1 on the keyboard, left click, wherever we want the thing to start coming out. Hit Shift A, curve, and Bezier. Now what that does is add this real simple curve line right there. Let's bring it to the forward here. And we want to move this. I'm going to scale it down a little bit so we can work with it a little bit easier. And we can rotate it a lot, so R and Z will rotate it. R and Y, we'll rotate it that way. And there we go. All right, so the way we want to do this, we're gonna have to play around with this a lot, basically. So if we go to tab, we have the option to, you know, really start adjusting the actual points of this. All right, so we have this one right here. Now, if you right click and hold, you can take the angles and really change them around. So we're gonna have to do that with some of these. Left click will make sure it's set. And so we kind of want it to come up or from here and then wrap around. All right, so if I hit 3, we'll get a side view. It's coming out way too far. So I'm gonna move this in, coming out around near the floor. Okay, and then if you take the last point right here, you can hit E to extrude it. And just move it over here. So if we go to 3, we'll see the side view. You want it to come up and around. And then you hit R, you can rotate it. Hit 1, go to front view. All right, and rotate this. And you can see I'm just really playing around with these. Oops, left click. All right, and take this one, we're gonna hit E again. Oops, take this and trying to make it look natural and like kind of like a natural ring going around. So like I said, you're gonna have to play around with this likely. And I'm gonna keep playing around with this until I get mine correctly. So you don't want to sit here watching me do this whole time. So I'm gonna pause, and then once I get it aligned right, I'll come back. All right, so this is what I have so far, and what I want to do is give this some thickness so we can see what this looks like, this path. So the way you do that is click on this curve section, and the offset right here, or the depth, is what will give it some thickness. So if we put 0.002 maybe, we'll see it has some thickness, and if we switch to rendered, we'll see what that looks like. All right, so this portion I had looking pretty good, although up here it needs a little bit of work. I'm gonna apply a subdivision surface on this, and we'll try 2 and 3. And so now that we can see what it kind of looks like, we can adjust this on this area. For mine, it doesn't look very good. So what I can do is switch back to solid, try to make the adjustment so that this is looking smoother. All right, so I paused and I adjusted it a little bit, and this will work for now. Now what I want to do is go ahead and give it a material. I'm going to hit new and select up here. Where is it at? I can never find it. There it is. I don't even know how to pronounce it. I'm just going to call it metal. Shit. So anyhow, roughness, turn it up a little bit. This basically makes it look like a metal type of image. And I also want to add a spotlight. So if we go to solid, go back here to edit or object mode, click up here in the back maybe up a little bit higher. There we go. And I hit Shift A, lamp, spotlight. See, it's currently facing down. If you hit R and move it there, that actually looks pretty decent. And if we go to rendered, see it's not sticking out too much. Though we can change the strength to something like 500 and we'll see it more. All right. That looks pretty decent. All right, so now what I want to do is also add kind of like a little directional pen tool anchor points where you can see the Bezier curve directions. And so to do that, I'm going to go to solid. By the way, make sure you save your project here. And I want to add a cube right on this line. So if I hit 3, see where it's at. I hit 1. All right, it should get added right near the center of that line. So Shift A, mesh, and cube. It's going to be huge, so hit S. Scale that thing down a lot. Right around there, it looks like it's pretty good. If we hit 1. All right. All right, that looks good. It's going right through it. So now what we want to do is give it the same material for now that we just gave here before. So in the other one. So if we go back to rendered, we could see it. Based on how small it is, we may want to increase the size, maybe just by twice. So S and 2. That increase it. That's a pretty good size right around there. All right, so now what we want to do is go back here to solid. Get our origin point right around there. We're going to hit Shift A and curve path. It's just a straight line. So hit S, scale it in. And then we're going to come around to 3 on the side view. And let's see here, but we'll do 1 first. We're going to hit R for the front view. 3, hit R. Yeah, right around there. Okay, so that looks like it'll be pretty decent right around that angle. And then we can come over here and give it a little bit of depth. So 0.02. No, that's too much. 0.1. Oh, sorry about that. 0.01. Actually, I'm going to try 0.007. That may be a little bit better. And give it that same material. Yeah, that's still a little bit too thick. So come back here. 0.004. All right, that's better. It's sticking out a little bit too much, but so what we want to do is click on this right here, and this is 004, and we'll just make the color a little bit darker. All right, so now what I want to do is go over here to solid. We want to add spheres on the end because that's how they're designed. Shift A, UV sphere. 8 by 8 will work fine. Hit S. All right, so we hit 1 here. Looks like it's in the center. 3. That looks pretty good. Yeah, there we go. And then we're going to hit smooth for shading. And then choose 003. See what that looks like on rendered. That looks good. Shift D and left click. And then we want to drag it to this other portion. So at the end of this tail up here. So hit 3. hit 1. Three. All right, that looks pretty good. And then we want to take all these objects, so shift, right click the middle portion, the cube, and then this sphere. Hit shift D and enter. And then we want to move it down and create another one over here. So what we'll do is get this moved over here. We'll go to 3 in the side view. We're going to hit R. Come over here around 1. Three. Oh, let's go to 7 real quick. 7's the top view. And then hit R. All right, so you want these to intersect. If we go back to 7. And come to 3. And this is in the center, this is not. So if I right click and hit shift, I'm going to do this twice here. 1 second. I just want to select those 3 right there. Move it down right there in the center. All right, so let's go to rendered. All right, pretty cool. Okay, so let's go ahead and make a couple of adjustments here. I'm going to take the floor and I'm going to make this darker. Yeah, I think that's good. I'm going to come down here. I'm going to drag this down and get our spotlight. I'm going to try 800. And I may also try moving it real quick. So if you hit G, you can place it specifically. Yeah, I think that's good right around there. That should be fine. I'm not going to be too nitpicky about it. All right. In a previous tutorial, and I'll try to remember to link that here, I had my, we took the DesignCourse DC lettermark logo and we made it 3D. Well, I'm going to include that in the project files with this, and you can go ahead and you can check that tutorial out how to make your logo 3D. I'm going to open mine up and copy it real quick. So this is it. With it selected, this DC right here, right click and select it, just hit Control C. Now say copy selected objects to buffer. Go back to our project. And I did something really stupid. I didn't save it before I opened that. So we're stuck with rendered. The only thing I didn't change was the lighting. That's back to where it was, but that's fine. So real quickly, I'm going to make that darker again. Okay. All right, so now I want to hit click right around there, Control V and paste that in, and then just hit R and start rotating this on different axes to get it kind of in an area that makes sense. I could scale it down a little bit and move it up. Yeah, right around there. And if I go to rendered, it doesn't have a material right now. It actually looks kind of cool like that. It's like real reflective. It's actually reflecting this screen right here. So let me hit this plus right there. We'll call this logo texture. See if I want to experiment with some of these. This is diffuse. Oh, okay. Well, 1 second. Let me see what I have selected. I have this. All right, so I have this selected. All right, so this is the actual SVG mat, it's called. I'm just gonna hit +1 right there. And see if I can experiment maybe with the color a little bit. No, I like that. All right, and you know what I also just realized when I opened up this right here, that got rid of my directional things that I made, so I'm gonna make those really quickly. Don't you just love it? All right, there we go. I had to recreate them again, unfortunately. You think Blender would kind of notify you that, hey, you don't have save changes before you open up a new document, but oh well. They don't right now at the moment. Anyhow, so yeah, I'm gonna right click back on this mat or this floor and make it a darker color. Yeah, maybe something like that will work. Okay, and let's see here, G and Z, G and X, no, Y. Scale it up a little bit. And I'm just really just playing around with this. Okay, so now what I want to do is, yeah, I do want to give it some color. So if I change this color, that doesn't really affect it too much. So if I change this here to mix real quick. Ooh, not emission, mix. Where are we at? There we go. Change this one to diffuse. Change this one to glossy. All right, so we got like a blue color here. Actually, you know what? I changed that from glossy to it's ansiotropic or whatever it's called. And just the FAC value more towards the metal texture. All right, so G, X, oops, G and X, or Z. I think right around there looks cool. All right, so I'm gonna consider, maybe I won't, let's see. I'm gonna check these things. I'm gonna select all three. And I'm gonna go back to rendered. And right now their strength is 20. I'm gonna try 50 just to see what happens here. Okay. We get a little bit brighter. Just for the fun, I'm gonna try messing around with the color. Yeah, man, that's not cool. Let's make sure this is white. All right, go back to our floor here. So the higher this one is, the more reflective it will be. Okay, and if we go back to our lamp, our spotlight, and let's see what happens here if we adjust this again. Hmm. 0.05. Actually, I think I'm pretty happy with how it is so far. So what I want to do now is set up the camera. So hit 0, that will give you into camera view. Hit N. Oh, let me turn on the screencast keys. You just go to user preferences. You don't need to do this, by the way. But if you ever wanted to know how to do a tutorial in the future with the screencast keys, this is what you do. You go to add-ons, screen, you type. Oh, there it is. It's already on. So make sure that's checked, and then start display. There we go. Hit N. Hit N again, though. Make sure you have lock camera to view. We're going to zoom up here and hit N again to hide that. And this is going to be whatever's rendered. So you can move around here. Yeah, I think right around here will work. All right, so go back to rendered. Now remember our samples we have set at 1,000. I'm going to choose 1,500 actually, and hit enter. I have 1920 by 1080. I'm going to change that to 1280 to 720 because that's what I'm currently recording at. And real quick, if you hit 0 again on your number pad, you can get out of there. Make sure everything looks pretty good here. And it does. Alright, so what we'll do is... Actually, you know what? No, it doesn't. This is too bright. So those emission planes up here kind of washed out the interface here. So what we want to do is, with those selected, try 30. Yeah, that's a lot better. Alright. Yeah, maybe even back to 20. I don't know. Yeah, that's better. Okay, so right around there is good. So now, Control S and save it, and hit render. So this may take a while, depending on your computer and your specs and what you put your samples at. For me, I'm going to pause until it is finished. And this is what mine produced, which I don't kind of like it because this is too thick, this line. And this is a little bit too thin, so I'm gonna hit escape. If you wanted to save that though, you can hit F3 and just save that as an image, your render. But I'm gonna adjust mine a little bit, my settings. So I'm gonna come over here, solid. I have this selected. Come back over here and try 0.004. Go back to rendered and see what that kind of looks like. And then same thing with this one, 0.003, and change this one as well. All right, so if we hit 0, all right, so I'm going to hit rendered again. All right, so that's just a little bit better. So you could probably play around with this a lot more. I'm going to leave it at that. So when you have what you like for a render, hit F3, and we'll save this as render, save as image, and then we'll switch back here to Photoshop. And we will open that up. So let's see here, render. All right, so we're at 66.7%. All right, and so I'm gonna create kind of like a cool glow effect that goes along this. And the way we'll do this is with the pen tool, ironically enough. And we're gonna make sure we have path selected instead of shape. So we're gonna create some lines that kind of go along our path. Like right around there, and create a new layer. Control Shift N, hit enter. Or that way, and we're going to switch back to the brush tool and make sure the size we're going to use, I think 3. So feather brush, hardness 0, 3, and the foreground color is going to be white. And then right click back on the pen tool, right click over here, oops, not make selection, stroke path, make sure simulate pressure is on, and hit OK. And then right click and delete the path. We'll see now it add kind of like this trail of sorts, I guess you could call it. So we're going to do another one, create another layer, Control Shift N, hit OK, right click, stroke path, simulate pressure, hit OK, and then delete, right click and delete path. And so we can keep on doing this as many times as you want. So I'll do one more time, and right up here. Yep, and then we'll go to stroke path, hit OK, right click and delete. So I'm going to pause. I'm going to do a few more of those. All right, so you can see I have a number of these now. And what I want to do now is kind of create like a glow area where it's kind of like like this orange right here. So we're going to take the pen tool, make sure shape is selected this time. And we're going to come out just a little bit wider than our little flares here. And start around here and then end up right around here by left clicking and dragging. And then just come around here. And I'm just holding Alt and clicking these things so that there. And then just basically create that shape, end it over there. And then we'll right click and rasterize the layer. And we will also go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. Maybe right around 12.7 pixels. And then check our layer blend mode. Just left click it twice so it's outlined in blue and use your down arrow on your keyboard. And you can experiment with the overlays on this to see how it looks. So you can see you have a lot of different options to create some interesting effects. And we're definitely not done. We're going to adjust it a little bit more. So I'm going through these again real quickly and trying to see what kind of makes sense. I'm going to take the eraser tool and create a large brush because I don't want it to look like it does now in terms of just being this one long blob. Right around here. Yeah, maybe just like that. And still going to experiment here with this. And you can always duplicate the layer as well. So right click, duplicate layer. And I may also erase part of this. All right, that looks kind of cool. And another thing we could do, create a new layer, Control-Shift-N, hit enter. We're going to make a white. Make sure path is selected. We're going to click on just one of these flare areas. Actually, no, we're going to do this differently. Sorry about that. We're going to delete that path real quick that I created. We're going to use the brush tool. And size maybe right around 50 will work. And then just left click once, like that. Control T. And hit Alt. Hit Alt again. Select apply, and then we can rotate it on the edge. Select apply. So now we have parts of it that really stick out and glow, which is pretty cool. So you can do that again. Control T, Alt. And you can do that as many times as you wish. Right around there. And then to make it look a little bit more realistic in terms of like a shadow that's reflecting off the surface, take this color here. We can just left click up here first. You don't want to get the edge getting cut off. Control T. Select the move tool, hit apply. You can drop down the opacity, something maybe right around there. There, yeah, cool. All right, and that is it. So yeah, that's basically the process that I used to create the one I did initially. I showed on Facebook before I recorded the tutorial. The results are pretty similar. Actually, one other thing I wanted to do, I desaturated the top of this and that. So to show you how I did that, just create a new layer on top of the initial. Control-Shift-N. We get the eyedropper tool, get this color right here, and kind of just block out that top portion, and then change it to luminosity. Oops, no you don't. 1 second. take this layer blend mode and experiment. Forget which one I used. Color. There we go. That's the one I was looking for. So it will just devoid any of it of color. Kind of gives it an interesting effect. Like that. Anyhow, yep, that is it. So hopefully you enjoyed the tutorial. It was a lengthy one, that is for sure. Make sure you check out DesignCourse Premium at designcourse.com/premium, where I teach you all things design, one-on-one training, along with video courses. And yeah, subscribe here on YouTube if you haven't yet. And I will see you in the next tutorial. Goodbye.